Hey guys, it's Fida and today I've come up with a chessboard cake recipe. This video was actually requested. Many people had asked me to put a chessboard cake recipe and here it is. So basically I'm going to make a vanilla cake batter and a chocolate cake batter, which you will find the recipe in this video. But if you want, you can go ahead and use your favorite vanilla cake and chocolate cake recipe. It doesn't really matter. But make sure the cake is not too soft, because if it is, it will be hard to make the chessboard pattern. Then once the cake is baked, we're going to make the chessboard pattern, which you will see how it is made. And then I'm going to frost it with some chocolate whipped cream frosting. You can use any sort of frosting that you like. Buttercream frosting, chocolate buttercream, or normal whipped cream, anything is fine. I'm just using chocolate whipped cream frosting today. Chessboard cake is actually like a semi-naked cake, so you don't want too much of frosting in it. A very little amount of frosting is more than enough. And in between the layers, we're not going to keep too much of frosting, or else the chessboard impressions will not be seen when you cut into it. So without further ado, let's get on to making this. First, I'm going to be making the vanilla cake batter. For that, here in a bowl, I have half a cup of butter. That's exactly 100 grams of butter. And this is softened, unsalted butter. It doesn't have to be too soft, just a normal softened consistency. Then into it, I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, along with half a cup of sugar. This is normal white granulated sugar. Once you've added that in, start beating it. You want to beat it until it comes to a nice and soft, fluffy consistency. The butter and sugar needs to cream up together. This process can also be done using a stand mixer, and if you don't have a stand mixer, you can do it with a hand beater. If you don't have a hand beater also, it's fine. You can do it with a spatula or a whisk. Just that it'll take a little bit more time, but the batter is going to come out perfect. Just scrape down the sides in between. Continue beating until nice, fluffy and creamy. Now that's nice and fluffy. I'm just going to scrape down the sides. Just beating that again, add in 2 eggs. These are medium-sized eggs, and you need to beat that until it becomes again nice and creamy. And within around 30 seconds, you will find that it becomes a bit more thicker. So at this point, I'm just going to set the hand beater aside and sift in the dry ingredients. For that, I have 3/4 cup plus 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Just sifting that in, and I'm going to add 3/4 cup of buttermilk. I'm just adding a small portion of the buttermilk right now. If you don't have buttermilk, you can use half a cup of milk instead of the buttermilk and avoid the buttermilk totally. So just beating that in after adding the buttermilk. Don't overbeat it, just until the batter just gets incorporated. When that's done, I'm going to set the hand beater aside. The batter is ready, just scraping down the sides. And this is how you want the consistency of the batter to be. So let's set this aside and prepare a cake pan. Here I have a prepared cake pan, which I've lined with parchment paper and greased the bottom with oil. I'm just going to pour in the cake batter. And as the batter is a little bit thick, you might want to smooth it down with your spatula. I'm just smoothing the top right now, and then tap it quite a few times, release any large air bubbles, and then we're going to keep this in a preheated oven of 180 degrees for around 45 minutes, and the timing will differ according to your oven. Here, for making the chocolate cake batter, I have half a cup of softened butter. That's exactly 100 grams of softened unsalted butter. I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of vanilla extract along with half a cup of sugar. Then just creaming that together. Again, you want to beat it until it's nice, fluffy and creamy. You want everything to incorporate well, and in between make sure you scrape down the sides. Now that's nice and creamy. I'm just gonna beat this again and add in 2 eggs. These are medium-sized room temperature eggs. Then again beat it until it comes to a nice and creamy consistency, and within around 30 seconds you will see that the batter will start thickening. At this point you can see that it has started thickening, and I'm gonna off the hand beater and scrape down the sides right now. At this point I'm gonna sift in some dry ingredients again. For that I have 3/4 cup plus 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour along with 1/4 cup of cocoa powder and 2 teaspoons of baking powder along with 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Sift in the dry ingredients and add in 3/4 cup of buttermilk. I'm adding the buttermilk into 2 parts. Add it gradually, and if you don't have buttermilk, you can use 1/2 cup of milk and avoid the buttermilk totally. Adding the rest of the buttermilk and beating it again. Beat it just until fluffy. You just want the batter to incorporate in well. The batter is just incorporated. I'm gonna off the hand beater and set it aside. Just scraping down the sides and incorporating in any excess dry ingredients. Now the batter is done. It's in a thick consistency. I'm going to set it aside and get onto the pan. Here I have a 9-inch baking pan lined with parchment paper and greased with oil. I'm just going to pour in the cake batter. And the batter is very thick, so I'm just going to spread it using my spatula, smooth the top, tap it quite a few times, and then you can keep this in a preheated oven of 180 degrees Celsius for around 45 minutes, and the timing will actually differ according to your oven which you're using. So here both of my cake layers are baked and cooled, and we can cut them into layers. Another thing, before cutting them into layers, it's always best to cool it down completely, because this will give the melted butter and the caramelized sugar to rest a little bit more time, so the cake will thicken a little bit and make it easier to work with. So once it's cooled, you can go ahead and cut the cake into 2 layers. Here I'm just making a mark along the side and using a thread. This is the easiest method I find to cut a cake into 2 layers, and this gives you equal portions. So putting the thread along the impressions and then pulling it out so you get 2 even layers. And that's perfect. So the chocolate cake is divided into 2. Doing the same thing with the vanilla cake, just making impressions along the sides and then going in with the thread. So 2 layers for the vanilla cake also. Now we can make the chessboard impressions. So this is the most trickiest part, but I'm going to tell you how to make it perfect. So you need 2 different types of rounds. One is going to be a smaller one and one is going to be bigger one. So the smaller one which I'm using is a cookie cutter and the bigger one is a bowl. So let me tell you, the outermost ring and the middle ring should be of the same size, whereas the innermost ring, that is the smallest ring, should be bigger than the outermost ring and the middle ring. I know it's confusing, but I'll just tell you the measurements. So in my case, I have a 9-inch pan, so the outermost ring is gonna be 2.5 inches the middle ring is going to be 2.5 inches, and the innermost ring, that is the smallest ring, is going to be 4 inches. So this is how it should work, because the outermost ring and the middle ring is going to be of the same size, and the innermost ring actually we're dividing into half when we are cutting it. So that's the reason you will get the perfect chessboard impression. So just follow what is said and you'll get the perfect chessboard impression. So once you've cut all of the 3 rings, you have to alternate the rings. So when the outermost ring is chocolate, the innermost ring should be chocolate and the middle ring should be vanilla. So that's how it should work. 2 rings chocolate and 1 ring vanilla. And the next one is going to be 2 rings vanilla and 1 ring chocolate. So the outermost ring is going to be vanilla, the innermost ring is going to be vanilla, and the middle ring is going to be chocolate. Do the same thing with the rest of your cake layers. So once you've cut out all the 3 rings, set the middle ring aside and keep the innermost ring inside the hole. Repeat the same thing with the other layer and we can alternate it. So cut all the 3 rings out and set the middle ring aside. Be very careful because they are very thin layers and there are chances of being broken. Set the vanilla, the middlemost vanilla ring into the chocolate rings and the middlemost chocolate ring into the vanilla rings. So this is how it should work and that's perfectly done. Next, here I have some whipped cream frosting. This is chocolate whipped cream frosting. I have a recipe to this in one of my cake videos. I'll leave a link in the description down below. And I'll just very fast tell you what all are the ingredients in it. So I've took 1 cup of whipping cream, added in 6 tablespoons of sugar and 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Beat it until stiff peaks and the cream should be ready. Now let's start stacking this cake. For that I have my cake board. I'm just going to put a small dollop of frosting on my cake board and keep in my first cake layer. So the first cake layer is going to be outermost layer chocolate, innermost layer chocolate and the middle layer vanilla. Brush on sugar syrup and then add a very thin layer of the chocolate whipped cream frosting and add in the second layer. The second layer should be outermost layer vanilla, innermost layer vanilla and the middle layer chocolate. You need to alternate it or else the chocolate chessboard impressions will not come. Brush on sugar syrup and very thin layer of the whipped cream frosting. Keep the third layer, which is going to be chocolate outside, chocolate inside and middle layer vanilla. Brush on sugar syrup again and very thin layer of chocolate whipped cream frosting. Continue. Keep the final layer, which is going to be vanilla outside, vanilla inside and chocolate in the middle. Brush on sugar syrup and then you can crumb coat this cake. Crumb coat is just a very thin layer of frosting which will catch all the crumbs, and in the final layer of the frosting there's not going to be any of these crumbs. Smooth it down as much as you can, but it's fine if you can't. It's just a crumb coat and just leave it like that. Then we can keep this in the refrigerator until the crumb coat is nicely chilled and we can start frosting our cake. This will take around half an hour to get your crumb coat chilled. Then put on the final layer of frosting. Again, this layer doesn't have to be too much of frosting because as we told earlier, chessboard cake is like a semi-naked cake, so there are going to be crumbs popping out. Smooth it as much as you can. So this was how much I could do. Then I'm going to keep this for a final time in the refrigerator before doing any decorations. I kept this in the refrigerator for around 2 hours and it's completely chilled. I'm going to pour on some chocolate ganache. decorate it however you want. And the outside doesn't really have to be pretty at all, because all the decoration is inside, and I'm sure you'll get impressed after cutting into this cake. And while cutting itself, you can understand how soft it is. It's not only delicious but super gorgeous. So you can see all the chessboard impressions. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you liked it. And if you did, please don't forget to give me a big thumbs up down below. Also subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Thanks once again and bye-bye.